remote, and I apologize for the communication snafu. It was an oversight on my part. When I fill out the agenda, I just start with last week's version, and I neglected to realize that our last meeting was remote. So apologies. I'll read the preamble and we'll get started. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access channel and on Facebook Live on the Public Access Facebook page. The following information is provided for members of the public that would like to participate in the meeting remotely. To participate from remotely, use the Zoom app on a computer or mobile device using webinar ID 7927370353, or alternatively dial toll-free 888-475-4499. Same webinar ID 7927370353. Telephone users may dial *9 to request to speak after joining the meeting. Computer and app users may use the raise hand feature to request to speak. This agenda lists all topics which may be discussed at the meeting and are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as a result of these discussions. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by the open meeting law. This meeting is hereby called to order. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any announcements?
No.
Hearing none. Is there any public comment from members of the board?
No.
Is there any public comment from the public?
Yes, Peter, I'd like to make a brief comment. We kind of discussed this the other day.
Yes, Mr. Passios, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Whereas I had chosen not to be reappointed to the Finance Committee as of the end of, when that happened, the end of June, I think was the end of that 3-year term. I'm speaking as a member of the public right now. One of your agenda items, I'm not sure that you're going to get very deeply into it this evening without your full board, but it's in relationship to the capital planning seat representative from this committee. Just a very quick history. Just after, or actually at the end of town meeting, I approached the chairman of the CPC. I'm actually presently vice chair. And I mentioned to him that I would like to talk to him about CPC, and ultimately a couple of weeks later in an email exchange, I expressed my deep interest in one way or another retaining participation in CPC going forward. I kind of had a feeling that one of the options might be to fill out my final year as the Finance Committee representative. You guys will be talking about that either this evening or when you postpone it to your next meeting. There are a couple of different options there. I just want you guys to know that I have a very strong desire, and I think my knowledge and history of the capital planning process after being on the committee, representing you guys, and involved with the capital planning as a citizen for the past almost decade, that I would like to continue that at least for the next year until the end of my term. That said, Peter, and you guys will go over the options available. I do not at this point intend to resign from the position. So I guess I'll leave it at that and let you guys decide what you would like to do.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Passios. Is there any further public comment? Hearing none. Chair's report. So tonight's agenda, I put quite a bit of thought in terms of what we could feasibly cover tonight, and how we could potentially address both reorganization, at least make some progress and get a start on our goals and operating principles for the year, and also lay out a calendar for the upcoming meetings, at least getting us through the end of September. The end of September being an operative date for me because, as I think most of you are aware by now, a lot has transpired since our last meeting for me. Following our last meeting, there was a vacancy announced on the school committee, which I volunteered for and was appointed as a member of the school committee and actually sworn in today. So I currently now sit on both the finance committee and the school committee. But pursuant to my appointment to the finance committee, I agreed with the members of the joint appointing committee, which is the select board and the four elected members of the school committee, that I would resign from my position on the finance committee no later than September 30th. And part of my reasoning to ask for that overlap, and there's a lot of very due concern about a potential conflict resulting in having a single person serve on both the finance committee and the school committee. I don't think that from an agenda standpoint, there's a lot of opportunity for real conflict in terms of deliberations on both committees inside of the next 2.5 months. And I do think that it is important for me to try to facilitate as smooth a transition as possible and set up the finance committee for the best possibility of success going forward by having some transition time. And by the way, if I were in a position where I needed to resign earlier, as you all know, I would remain available to you all as a resource for whatever you would need me for or want to connect with me on. So with that in mind, you know, the circumstances are admittedly unusual, and I apologize for the inevitable disruption and change of course that, you know, I think we all kind of thought we were on in terms of organization as late as our last meeting. But it's something that I felt compelled to do, and I think that we came to a pretty good agreement with the appointing committee the other night. So with that in mind, the way I constructed tonight's agenda was for item number 6 to be a general conversation about board reorganization and the upcoming calendar. And my reason for doing it that way was I don't think that there's been sufficient time for members to necessarily consider if they want to be chair or vice chair or clerk or on the capital planning committee or on the municipal building design committee. When you have a chair that is, you know, a lame duck and about to resign, that obviously creates, you know, a bit of a vacuum that needs to be accommodated for. So my hope is to have some discussion around reorganization. By the way, we don't have to take action on any of these items tonight if we don't want to. You know, the committee is effectively as it was formed, minus one member as of the last time we reorganized. So there's no statutory need to reorganize at this point. So we can choose to do that tonight or perhaps move that to a later date pending the outcome of that conversation. So with that in mind, I will move on to the next agenda item and we can have that conversation. So with regard to the reorganization, I'm sensitive to a couple of things, and I just want to bring it to everybody's attention, then I'll shut up and let you guys talk. The first is, you know, we are soon to be we are an understaffed board. This is a board of 7 members. We currently have 6. I don't know if there are applicants for the vacant seat. As of a couple of days ago, there weren't. I don't know that there are yet, no. The town manager just shook her head, so I'll take that as a no. And, my resignation from this board is going to happen within the next 70 days. So we're not fully seated, we're not fully staffed, and there's a lot to cover in terms of assignments. We certainly don't need to cover all of the liaison assignments. We can pick and choose that which interests us there. But the capital planning and the municipal design, we kind of need to do, right? Capital planning is stipulated in the charter, and the Municipal Building Design Committee is, dealing with some pretty timely issues, and the Finance Committee has a seat at that table to appoint. Mr. Menard asked me the question before the meeting, what is my intention? I think we lost Evan. I'm going to bring him back in here. What is my intention in terms of the Municipal Building Design Committee? And it's an important committee to me. I would like to continue to serve on that committee, but I don't think that it would be appropriate for me to serve as a representative of the Finance Committee on another committee that there's also a school committee representative. I think that, in what we were talking about conflicts the other night, I think that would present an inherent conflict as well. So it is my intention to resign from the Municipal Building Design Committee, and I'm hopeful that we can identify a replacement on that committee as early as this evening.
Are there open seats on that committee?
No.
The
Municipal Building Design Committee, I believe, is fully staffed.
Who are the at-large seats?
You have to put me on the spot, huh?
Okay.
Greg Roy is one.
Christina, whose last name I would
Yeah, I know who you're talking
butcher.
about.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Dave Blatt.
But Greg Roy was also.
Anyway, any thoughts, any interest in any of these positions that I've highlighted before we move, or does anybody have any preferences on actions that we should take tonight and or postpone to a future meeting?
For me, Tom Gray here. The building committee, I've been watching as best I can, so I've had interest in that, and so I would, if you're going to be resigning from it, then we need somebody from the finance. I could do that if nobody else wants to do it.
Okay.
So I'll just say up front, I'm fine with remaining as vice chair. I have a lot of travel for work coming up, so I'm hesitant to take on chair, and I'd be hesitant to take on another committee at this point. So me personally, I don't think I could do that and do justice to the town.
Yeah, and I'll just put some of my cards on the table too. Like I don't feel like I have the capacity to be on one of those two committees, which I think are quite demanding. So I'm I don't know if it's Tom or Dave or somebody else. I mean, I'm happy to go with whoever volunteers and who wants to, put their hat in the ring for those. So, but I don't think either one of those is me.
Any interest in chair?
Tom, come on.
Chris, you know, it's the same thing that, it's a time commitment, and, with my job and 4 kind of teenage kids, it would be a lot for me, and I just don't know that I can do it.
So, this is obviously out of order, but, you know, some thoughts on the appointments to the CPC and the Building Design Committee. I think, Tom Gray, I think that you would be an excellent member of the Municipal Building Design Committee, because I think that you would come at this much the same way that I have, which is, you know, we need to think of this in turn, you know, the budget needs to be at the center of this, if not right beside, you know, the needs and use cases that are being discussed. And financial feasibility needs to happen, because whatever we do needs to get passed, and nothing's going to get passed if it's not financially feasible. So I think that, you know, you are well suited to represent the position of the Finance Committee, and to ensure that the Finance Committee appropriately deliberates those issues and weighs in when appropriate, and you know, in a timely manner. With respect to the Capital Planning Committee, you know, because I'm a lame duck, I'll go with whatever the preference is of the majority of the members on this board. And again, we don't have to make a decision on any of this tonight. But, you know, Chris IM'd me yesterday or this morning, or, you know, my bias is to have members sitting in these appointed positions, sitting members sitting in appointed positions. But I think that given what Mr. Passio's reported tonight, and by the way, in this case, it isn't as simple, because CPC is a charter stipulated job, and it is a termed job. We would have to follow the removal process as outlined in the charter. And I reached out to Heather earlier this week to validate that. As it turns out, Chris had made a similar inquiry a couple of years ago, so Heather had the opinion from town council ready to go, and it is what it is, which means, you know, a letter, you know, effectively a hearing, a decision to remove. You know, there's a process involved here that may be more distraction than it's worth for the members of the Finance Committee, not to mention, you know, it's a function that we need to fill that we don't necessarily have the manpower to fill, or the time and resources to fill. So, you know, I would be inclined to leave Dave in that role for at least the time being.
Yeah, and just for clarification, my question was about the terms part of it, and whether you voted, not whether I was seeking to remove whoever was there 2 years ago. So I go on record on that one.
Fair point. Fair point.
Because it is kind of an odd thing where I don't know if we do it anywhere else like that. So, and then, you know, no secret, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. One thing I'd like to understand, and unfortunately Dave had to go back to work, is how Dave would reach back to the board. Because now, you know, committee reports would come. How would we get committee reports? And we had a lengthy discussion about last year's capital plan, how we wanted to see more of an insight into how the sausage was being made. Mm-hmm. And I know Dave, and at least myself, maybe some others, we weren't 100% aligned on that. But I do trust Dave to have the best interests of the town in mind, and I would not want to see him removed for those reasons. But I guess that's the one thing I'd like to understand, is how he would seek to do that. He shows up at everything, so maybe that's, I mean, we don't have to worry, but
He could wind up being back on the finance committee next week, you know, I mean, you never know with Dave, so.
I mean, the other thing we talked about with respect to capital planning is perhaps getting those taped at least this year, because it's one of the few boards, and it's an important board, that doesn't seem to be taped so, yeah, that's all I had, I guess, on that.
Mr. Waters?
So Chris sort of stole my thunder there with the visibility of the capital planning committee. I agree completely. Dave has my full confidence in doing what's best for the town and representing some form of the finance committee, I think. But our big concern this past year was the visibility of the capital planning committee and how they came to their decisions, and ended up being potential amendments put forward on town floor, and it was just a big debacle, I think, that ended up happening as a result of, like Chris said, not having the tapes, not having, having meetings, but minutes were difficult to come by. It was just, it concerns me, and I wonder if there is some way that we can sort of mandate, whether it be a liaison from the finance committee or something where we can get sort of back and forth feedback, or having the capital planning committee come in on a monthly basis during budget season, something like that. That would sort of be my main concern, is just making sure that we really do have visibility through that process, because I think that was really sort of a glaring hole that we had in last year's budget season.
So when do they start meeting in earnest?
I'm waiting for tonight's appointment set up, the initial meeting.
Okay, so the process kind of starts right now.
Pretty quick.
Okay.
So if we were to, I'm just kind of, figuring out how to make as much progress as we can here. I think that there's probably some discussion to schedule between, we don't have to take action on the CPC. We can, tentatively plan to kind of leave it alone. There's no action required, really. And we could potentially schedule a conversation with Dave to kind of ensure that our intentions are clear, and then go from there. I mean, I think Dave understands that as well, and having spoken privately with Dave, I think he generally agrees around the principles of transparency that we've all discussed. So I don't anticipate that, Dave is pretty independently minded, as we all are, but, Dave is in particular when it comes to individual items, but I think, he can certainly, fully serve the role that the Finance Committee intends.
Yeah, so chair is certainly like the...
Yeah, so the elephant in the room right now is chair, clearly.
Eeny, meeny,
Yeah.
who's not here?
We were joking before we went live
Jay.
that, we could appoint Jay and just call it a night.
Do we have the option, in the same way that we have co-clerks, to do like a co-chair as well?
That's a
Is that
good...
a thing?
Yeah, that's a good question, Evan. I don't know. I think that would be very difficult to affect. But I don't know if there's any precedent in Lunenburg of doing that kind of thing. Yeah, having like co-chairs or...
We're all chair.
Yeah, that's why you have a vice chair, right? Yeah. So, yeah, I don't think that... I'm not sure that I think in practice, two co-chairs could possibly work out a way of figuring out who chairs what meeting and who posts agendas and those kinds of things. Where it would be exceptionally difficult, I would imagine, is for the town manager and department heads to interact with the day-to-day representative of the Finance Committee, which is the chair. And that would add, a certain amount of complexity. Not that it's like an everyday thing. I probably talk to Heather, outside of meetings every other week on average. I mean, it's not a frequent thing, but frequently she'll text me and say, what about this, or when are we doing that? And I think it would add a degree of complexity that I don't think we want to add to her plate or the rest of the department heads in town. Again, just my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think it would be difficult to be co-chair, but I think the vice chair relationship definitely works.
Okay. So what I'm gathering here is that we all need to do some arm twisting on this. And, that we can do this in an open meeting tonight, or we can wait and have individual conversations and come back in a week and kind of see where we're at, because we're due to meet next Thursday anyway. Does anybody have any thoughts on that, on not acting on this tonight?
I will not be here next Thursday, so.
You won't be there Thursday.
Oh, you're not going to be here next Thursday? Evan?
No, I'll be very much offline.
Right, okay. Well, you were the guy whose arm I was going to twist, so.
I mean, the only concern that I honestly
works.
I have the bandwidth, it's the knowledge that I am very concerned with. That it would almost be sort of a disservice where, I've learned a decent amount over the last year and a half, but that's still a large learning curve that exists.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very sympathetic to that position. I've learned a lot in the last year, stuff that I thought I knew that I was wrong about. Quite publicly in the case of the capital plan. These committees and these jobs are, there's a lot of OJT involved here. And, I'm sympathetic to that position, but I also think, Evan, that you would do a really good job if you took the role. Mr. Baelish.
Yeah, so I hear you, Evan. I mean, but I also think that just a couple observations. One is, like Peter said, I think a big part of the job is effort and capacity and wanting to do the right thing. And I have every confidence that that's true with you. I think, frankly, I don't know what it was like prior to you, Peter, as chair, but I've been quite, impressed with the amount of time and effort you've put into this, which I think is, I'm guessing is over and above what's normally goes on with these types of committees. But so I don't think it necessarily has to be done the same way, right? And every committee chair is going to do things slightly differently. And I think, Evan, if you, I'd be really happy to support in different ways. If you did take the role and help things move along, but I don't know. I guess I'm less concerned about that sort of thing. And I think, it's a volunteer committee. We're all here just trying to help out the town. And I think everybody should understand that.
Yeah, I know another chair who often says, I literally know nothing about this, and I have to come up and, chair a meeting associated with a topic. So I think you can get the support. I think, we have a very strong, town side that knows this process really well. between, Karen and Heather and others. So, and, I would be willing to work with you on stuff like that as vice chair via, if I were vice chair, if I remained it, via chat, email, because we can have one-on-one conversations outside of it. If there's questions on things but again, my problem is just, trying to set this thing up when I'm literally 8 hours ahead in time for 2 weeks it's not fair.
Yep. So,
Heather would kill me.
so, and again, I'm just thinking out loud here, so bear with me. I apologize because this eventuality wasn't really known until 48 hours ago, and I feel bad for putting all of us in uncomfortable positions, but nevertheless, here we are, and the die is cast. Also on this agenda item is upcoming calendar. So here's just a couple of thoughts. So Evan is not available on July 28th. As it turns out, I am not available on August 11th. So what I might suggest is given the timing and the short time that we've had to react to this and kind of think it through, is we kind of move on tonight with Evan as, a designated future chair, and the other piece here is Jay isn't here, and Jay is the senior member of this committee. He's been around the longest, and I haven't heard from him, and I don't know what's up. So, but this is an out of sequence meeting, so, perhaps we take a month, we talk this through, we can meet individually to talk about, how we would do this if that eventuality were to occur. You could meet with Evan in particular, or, other potential candidates for the role. And then, perhaps instead of meeting on August 11th, or perhaps on August 11th, you all take this up in my absence, or we push this out to August 18th and we do it then.
I'm also not here August 11th.
Okay, so we don't do it on August 11th. Perhaps we don't meet on August 11th, and we revisit committee organization on August 18th. Or we could take action right now. I'm just throwing out options here.
Have you heard anything from Jay about interest or anything at this
I haven't.
point?
I've had zero communication with Jay. I think. Well, let me check my email before I start accusing Jay of not having reached out. No, I haven't heard from... yes, he did say he wouldn't be here tonight. I apologize. He reached out last week, and I missed his email.
I think either whatever we do, I think consulting with Jay is important, right?
I agree.
With the committees growing smaller, especially, I think his role is really important.
Yeah, and if you can meet, even if you're not there, I think my availability,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
I'm willing to be vice chair. If you don't want me as vice chair, I wouldn't be upset either this year.
Well, we also don't have to make a call on the 11th versus the 18th until we are going to meet on the 28th, next Thursday. So we could, potentially call an audible next week and say we're going to make that decision on the 11th or the 18th. The problem with the 11th is that, we've got a potential quorum issue with the 11th, given that you and I will both be absent, so.
Do we have any interest of new people? Have we had any talent bank forms turned in?
There are no talent bank forms in right now, Evan. I have had one substantive conversation this week, but I don't want to out anybody yet as a potential candidate.
So Terry's coming back.
Scare him off.
Yeah, we gotta go find a former chair.
Yeah, that's a really good idea, actually.
So I suppose at this point, I would be open to the idea. I'm certainly not completely against it, as long as there is sort of help that exists around from the town and from other members and whatnot.
Would your preference, Evan, be to move on it tonight, or do you want to give it a little time to let it stew? Because we could do either one.
I mean, I think we emailed back and forth a couple of weeks ago now, so I've ruminated plenty on it.
Yep.
It's, the only concern that I would have is that I don't want, as Jay being the senior member, I would not want to step on toes or anything with him.
Okay, so do you want to just push it to next week and we'll kind of go from there?
Sure.
Is
But
everyone
again, I
else-
will not be here, so.
Well, we can appoint you in absentia if you're okay with it.
True.
You know, I would encourage you to reach out to Jay, and I will do as well. I will do so as well. And that will keep us within the metes and bounds of open meeting. And kind of see where we're at, and we can appoint you in absentia next week.
Sure, that works.
Okay.
Are you up for hearing a motion on municipal design committee, though?
Before I do that, because of just the way we've constructed this conversation and the agenda, we also have school committee, police, fire, DPW, COA, library, parks, land use, Board of Health, and green communities. So, so there are a lot of liaisons to also appoint. And I'm sensitive to the fact that we don't have our organization set yet. So what I would suggest, if we look at a reorganization vote next week, we obviously we can take care of building design committee tonight, but can we kind of go down that list and maybe, write in potential, likely names so that we can take rather efficient action next week on this?
Can I ask one question on clerk going forward?
Yep.
So, over the last couple of years, I've kind of taken it upon myself to have a OneDrive set up for this. We are moving to a new platform as a town. One of the things I think the clerk in a new, modern board probably should be responsible for is kind of the document management side of things. Right now, we do a lot of emailing of documents, which I do think is a little risky, because if anyone ever wanted to see a document that was discussed, they can ask for it. And you don't, if for some reason we didn't have the email, then we could lose the document. So, I do think that a document repository should be established on the town platform, and hopefully that is the plan. And B, I almost feel like the clerk's role now is less about doing the minutes, because we have Amanda to do the minutes for us, but is probably to maintain, some level of document control. So that I think as we're going through the who does what here, we probably should look at what the clerk's role is and whether we all agree with that kind of, maybe partially redefinition of the role.
Yeah, and we could also, maybe work that into our, annual document, or,
Yeah.
policies and goals document, too.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm in agreement, Chris. I think that's a good idea. I think that once we get to the new platform, and hopefully the town manager can give us an update on how that process is going, we need to do that as soon as possible. Figure out what the publication, capabilities are, how that can potentially interact with the website and posting public documents, particularly when we get into budget season and that kind of thing. And ideally, the clerk should be sort of the master of that.
Okay.
So, today, Tom Gray and Tom Baelish serve as co-clerks. Is that something that one of you wants to become the primary, or share that responsibility, or, you know, what are your thoughts or preferences there?
Yeah, I'm fine to continue on. And Tom, I don't know if you're taking the other role, if you want to drop that, it's up to you. I'm happy to do either way.
That's fine. Yeah, have Tom to be the clerk. It'll be fine with me.
Remember, clerk is second in line for chair, so.
Yeah,
I reconsider.
Okay. All right, that's good. That's a good thought. I'm glad we covered that. We can just go down these quickly and see if there's interest, and just, you know, if you could just say that you have an interest, just so that we have it for the record, and then, you know, we can start filling in some blanks this week, and then maybe solidify this next week or in a subsequent meeting. So school committee today is Evan, right?
It is.
I think if Evan is chair, we don't want to make him the school committee rep, but maybe he wants to be it. It would be.
No, I would be happy to not sit through those meetings unless I need to necessarily.
They're going to be a lot more interesting, Evan. I'm going to throw something down there, you know?
They are. I'll still be watching them on occasion, but if I'm going to be chair, I would prefer not to have to also liaison for the school committee, just for a time constraint.
Anybody want to put dibs in for school committee? Okay. Hearing none for now. And some of these I don't know, I just don't recall where we were at, but police and fire, in a past year, I served as that role, and I don't, do we have anybody currently?
Thought it was
One of the
Tom
Tom.
Gray.
Tom Gray?
No, it was me, actually.
Oh, okay.
So I've had, this past year, I had police, fire, and library. And I can't say I did a great job, but those were under me. And
Okay.
I'm happy to continue, and I will certainly try to do better of attending some of these meetings.
Okay.
But also, if someone else wants to do one of those, I'm happy to open it up too.
Okay. DPW, do we have anybody?
Historically, Jay.
Yeah, Jay, I think Jay has been that, and I think we should talk to him about continuing there.
Tom, do you want to trade school committee for fire, library, and police?
Not really.
Okay.
So we've had a good liaison on school committee that attends the meetings as well, so I do feel that,
I'm sorry, Chris, can I just make one comment? I don't mean to sound snarky on that at all. I don't mean that to be. It's just, all my kids are homeschooled. We really don't have a lot of interaction with the schools, and it's just not an interest of mine in the town per se. So it's not anything against the committee or anybody on the committee at all. I just want to make that clear.
Well, as a member of the school committee, I appreciate you taking the time to specify that.
have you been sworn?
I have been, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, no, I appreciate you saying that, Tom. So what were you getting at, Chris?
Well, again, I think if we have questions, we typically have the liaison come to our meetings. So I don't feel that there's a huge hole that might form that way.
Assuming that continues, right? I mean, that's not something that the finance committee controls.
I understand, but again, we're going to become a 5-member board. The average
It's a big
tenure
time
of
suck.
most of the board is about 2 years now. There's a lot on our plate. And those are just long meetings. I mean, the alternative is you just have a conversation with the, the chair of the
Yep.
school committee and,
Well, I could have a conversation this week with Carol about that too, and just kind of see what she thinks. I mean, the school committee is a 5-member committee, and everybody on that committee has at least a couple of assignments, that are pretty regular, so.
excuse me.
So anyway, I can, I'd like to get Carol's opinion on that.
Okay, yeah, no, that,
Okay, so I'm just going to read through kind of the unassigned, and just if anybody has an interest in any of these, and we don't have to fill all of them. Council on Aging, Parks, Land Use, Board of Health, I know a guy on that that we can probably rely on, and Green Communities.
I'm happy to do Board of Health.
All right,
I mean, I can always talk to my wife about parks,
that's a fair point.
who's no longer the chair,
All right, who's the chair?
Anna Lockwood.
Okay. Okay, so that's
I can do,
possible.
I'm doing land use now. It's Tom Gray.
Okay. Is that okay? You okay to continue there, Tom?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, we're making a little bit of progress here. It was difficult, but we're getting there. Okay. I'm going to move on. I would entertain a motion to appoint Tom Gray to the Municipal Building Design Committee, pending my resignation, which will happen as early as tomorrow, assuming we make this appointment.
Do you have to resign?
I don't know. Probably not.
So moved.
We didn't, the precedent was when we appointed me was we just did it, and we didn't wait for a resignation on that one, so.
I would second, I just wanted the stipulation that upon my resignation would,
It doesn't have to be conditioned. We can just make the assignment.
okay. All right, then second.
Who made the motion?
I did, Evan.
All right, we have a motion from Evan and a second from Chris. Any further discussion? Hearing none. A roll call vote. Mr. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Baelish,
Yes.
Mr. Waters,
Yes.
Mr. Menard,
Aye.
and an aye for myself. It is unanimous. Mr. Gray is appointed to the Municipal Building Design Committee.
Good luck.
Good luck. Okay. And just so everybody's clear, we are meeting here on July 28th, and we may take action on reorganization on July 28th. I will keep you informed. All right. Town Manager, Finance Director report. Good evening. Thank you for coming. I apologize again.
No need to apologize. So it's been since June, right?
June
The
9th.
last meeting. So I'll just read off some of the updates I gave to at the select board meetings on different projects. 925 Mass Ave. So the EPA had promised us that we'd get funding through the Targeted Brownfields Assessment Program because they were getting a lot of funding from the federal government from the stimulus package. So I had a meeting this week with the Brownfields coordinator at the site. We'll be moving forward, and the tax foreclosure, the final judgment was issued on July 6th. So that, in essence, after talking to our tax title attorney, that is our deed to the property and transfers the ownership from the previous owner to the town. There is obviously a 1-year redemption period where it becomes completely final, that the previous owner could come back and pay all the back taxes on that. But it still gives us permission to do all access to the property and do all the necessary work to remove the underground tanks and all these, and limited soil contamination removal. So,
Congratulations.
Heather, if we put all this money into the cleaning up the property, would the current owner have to pay for that too?
we're not putting up any money for this cleanup.
No,
Yeah.
the brown.
The EPA is covering all the
Right.
costs.
But wouldn't they have to pay the EPA back?
Potentially, they could have to pay through that redemption period if they came back for that.
Can you say again what the redemption period is?
1 year from the final, the judgment for foreclosure.
Okay.
So July 6th of next year.
Okay. So we own it.
Yes.
Okay.
Obviously, we know the remote meeting extension passed, so that is...
Good thing.
Yeah. We're good until March 31st of 2023. The Flat Hill Road Culvert Project, we had applied for a small bridge program application in March of this year, and we received notification last week that we were awarded the maximum grant amount of $500,000. So that was really good news, so we can move forward with that project. So the DPW director and I have been working with the engineer and everything that we need to do to line up it going out to bid, which will probably be around January.
It'll go to bid in January
You're right.
for work done next construction season?
Right, and the work projected to be completed by December of 2023.
Okay. So I'm just thinking out loud here in terms of free cash, because the town has appropriated a considerable amount of money for this already. We're talking FY
We would
25 or
know
26 free cash.
We'd
right?
know in January, February timeframe of what the costs, what the bids come in at.
Right. But with the project extending another year, that number isn't going to get certified.
Right, unless
until
it's extremely under.
sometime in
or-
2025,
yeah.
probably.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
The financial management letter comment on the fraud risk assessment. We had the meeting with the auditors at one of the select board's meeting, and they went through the management letter comments. We had resolved all but one comment, and so I received a quote from to do the fraud risk assessment. Based on that amount, we're going to be able to do it this fiscal year because we have funding through a rewards credit program through our insurance company, so we're going to be able to do that this year.
Address the comments.
Yeah, no, perform a fraud risk assessment.
Oh, I'm sorry. I understood that the assessment had been done.
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
Okay.
No, that was their comment, was that we should do a fraud risk assessment.
In the audit.
Right,
There was a comment.
in the audit letter.
All right. I'm sorry. I'm slow tonight, obviously. So, okay. Got it.
So that will resolve all our comments, and maybe we'll have no comments
I'm
next year,
sure,
but they always
yeah.
find something, which is good. We always want to keep improving. So, let's see. Lufa Farms proposal. So we received a notice of intent from this company called Lufa Farms to do a agricultural business at the same location as Bright Farms at 361 Mass Ave. So they did indicate that they would be looking for both state and local tax incentives. So we haven't yet gone into any discussions on that with them, but we anticipate that coming forth.
Do they, what's the nature of that? Would they have to have a PNS with Powell's before that begins? Or, because Powell owns that land, right?
I believe it is Powell's land. And, they would have to have that. They'd have to go through the site plan process with the planning board, but they were provided all the materials from When Bright Farms.
Yeah.
It's very
Very
similar operation, so would address access and all of those items.
That would be pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So one thing just on that, when Bright Farms made a deal, there was kind of a deal made with conservation for access or a piece of land to connect or something like that.
Right. They ended up, in the end, giving a donation to conservation of $10,000, even though nothing transpired. So the land didn't change hands, but they, in lieu of that, they gave a donation.
Okay, I guess my question would have been, A, I thought that was a good thing to be part of it. But the second thing is, the other parcel that kind of connects into there is the south side of the Saliva property, which is actually Parks property. And I was wondering if we could consider looking at something like having whatever their access road is there, that may be a better access area to that property. So you're not going down, Northfield and parking there, rather coming off of 2A and up to the south side of that property.
Okay.
So
I can make
that
a
was
note
just
to speak
a
to someone from Parks
consideration.
and, introduce that to the select board because they'd be the one negotiating.
Yeah, just a thought to pass on and maybe work with Parks on it as well, because they did work with conservation, but Parks actually owns that one. That
South side
The
of
south
that
side of that property.
Okay.
Just a thought.
Some items that are potential warrant articles for the fall special town meeting, which is, we don't have a date yet, but know that we'll be holding one, is adding salary administration plan positions to the compensation classification grid that have been approved by the Personnel Committee. Possibly a article for funding for an outside consultant to perform a compensation study for SAP positions. Additional funding in the assessor's budget for our cyclical data inspections. That principal assessor estimates around $35,000 needed for that. And prior year invoice from fiscal '21.
Fiscal 21.
That was a miscalculation and a step that was caught later.
So I should have brought this up under Chair's report, because you had sent an email about special town meeting. The proposed date for special town meeting is November 15th. And the town manager had inquired if people would be available or there were obvious conflicts for that date. So an opportunity just for any member of the finance committee to reach out to the town manager on that if you have a objection or issue with that date.
Great.
So my only question is a scheduling question, because I'd love to be able to report to this committee a much more solid calendar for the next several meetings. When do we anticipate either a Q4 or end of fiscal year report?
I was just talking with Karen about that, probably August 23rd. And I put together a draft budget calendar today that hope to
Okay.
get finalized.
So,
Soon.
this is something that'll come up later on in the discussion on the goals and procedures memorandum. So last year, we had intended to have Karen and Heather come in and report quarterly on the fiscal report. What wound up happening in practice was, for most of those quarters, we were advised that that report would happen at the select board meeting on a given date, and watch it, and you can come back here with questions if you have them. So I just want everybody to be aware, the 23rd of August is a Tuesday, that's a select board meeting, and we would likely be meeting on the 25th. So be forewarned. We could do it again on the 25th if necessary, but, you know, just so everybody's aware, you know, those are the dates, tentatively.
Couple more updates.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you
It's
were
all
done.
right. It's been a long time since we met. Pavement management plan. The DPW director and I met with a company called Beta Group to do an update to our pavement management plan. So we did engage them, this company, and they would be using LiDAR, which is light detection and ranging technology, to do the update. And with the estimated time frame, we think would be wrapped up by late October, early November with that. Update on the streetlights. I've been meeting with our town council and Unitil and their council at a few meetings. We brought to the board this past Tuesday the purchase and sale agreement and the license agreement that we have to enter as well for the lifetime of our ownership of the lights. And we should have this wrapped up in time for the August 2nd Select Board's meeting to vote on. So that's looking favorable, and that we'll have that done shortly.
On pavement management, are we paving in the current fiscal year, or are we waiting to get the plan nailed down and do more paving in the late part of the fiscal year, or what's the
I'd have to
thinking there?
check what's left. I know they did a lot in the
We did a lot of paving in June,
Yeah, a lot in the,
but I haven't seen any paving announcements in
Not-
July.
yeah, it typically doesn't happen much in the summer. It'd be like the fall, but I'd have to see with the DPW
Okay.
director.
I mean, I guess my personal opinion is let's get the plan nailed down and spend like crazy come May and June with a better plan than a haphazard approach now. But, you know, if there's obvious areas that we want to pave, you know, I don't know. And then somewhat related to that, for vegetation control, I noticed Ray Moran going down Pleasant Street in June. I'm assuming, you know, expending end-of-year money to do cutting along roadsides and stuff like that. Are we still doing that in the current fiscal year, or, because it wasn't really a budgeted line, and we don't have a new tractor yet, so
Right.
are we doing any vegetation control?
I haven't talked to the DPW director about that, and yeah.
Someone's been
Haven't seen
doing
it.
it because I've noticed it
Yeah.
along the roads.
It was done earlier in the,
I know, yeah, a lot was done in June. And I saw Ray Moran literally himself out there with a tractor in June. I just don't know if that's continuing in July or not. You know, I mean, and I understand how that works. There's, you know, unexpended funds. We've got a vegetation problem. Let's go attack it. But that line wasn't really funded for this year, so just curious what, you know,
Yeah.
and we don't have a tractor yet, so. Okay.
I don't have an answer.
I have two questions. One, where are we on the engineering on the Flat Hill
Flat Page Street?
Flat Hill runoff issue.
Our engineer had provided a scope of work, which we asked him to kind of further define for results.
Is there an
So
outlook on that?
I'd have to check back in. No,
Okay.
that's last I talked to.
And then the beach house, is that gonna become a capital project, or what's?
It was one of my updates. That
Still not there.
Not,
Oh, I thought you said you were done.
no decisions have been made on that, just we received the one bid for that project. It was a lot higher than we expected, so we have to regroup on what the goal is for that overall building, or if we're just going to rebid that that piece of the project, and maybe, because we bid during the height of construction season in the summer, so people already probably had work lined up through the summer and couldn't do the work.
So who makes that decision? Is that you or the Parks Commission or the Select Board or?
I was going to meet with the DPW director regarding that as well.
Okay. Any other questions for the, are you done?
One other thing was our road materials bid. We did receive that for fiscal '23, and prices did increase from our fiscal '20 contract between 20 to 40% for our materials. So,
I do have one more question when are you done?
yes.
Okay.
That was it,
Sorry.
I think.
When, do we get new emails, or should we be on new emails?
Not yet.
Okay.
We're reviewing all the different licenses that we need for all the boards and commissions.
Okay.
All the staff has been moved over, and our staff's files have been selectively moved over to the cloud.
And the Lunenburg Online addresses seem to be forwarding, right? Because we're still on Edition Networks, and it seems to be working fine.
Oh, yeah.
Just,
Yep.
I had this fear when you cut over that nobody's address was going to be correct in the address book, but
It's forwarding.
it seems to be working. So,
Okay.
do you have so you don't know when that is going to occur, or?
No, not at the moment. Our lead from Suzer IT is out on maternal leave. So basically we're in flux right now, but we have a number of other projects that we're working on with them as well. So. And actually, there's one other update is the state passed the budget, state budget. We will have an additional $54,417 in state money over what our estimate was at the annual town meeting.
Is that in unrestricted, or is that just?
That's unrestricted government aid? No, that's a combination of both our cherry sheet numbers and our assessments. The overall
The all in.
difference for both.
Okay.
What was the number again?
54,417.
Good that it's a positive number and not a negative number. Right? That's
To
a
the
positive number?
Positive.
Okay. Okay,
Now that's all I have.
thank you, Madam
You're
Town
welcome.
Manager.
Any other questions before?
Any
I
other questions for
leave?
the Town Manager? Okay. I will ask for your guidance. I'm just looking through the rest of our discussion for tonight. I'm going to reverse items 9 and 10, so you guys might be able to get out of here and just get into a quick discussion about fiscal policy and debt planning. If that's okay with you.
And I do just want to volunteer, whoever's chair. Obviously, I'm happy, and I know Karen would be too, to help guide them and whatever is needed possible. So I just want to throw that out there.
Much appreciated. All right, so thank you, Madam Town Manager. So I'm going to reverse items 9 and 10 on the agenda so that we can have a quick discussion about the timing and plan for review of fiscal policy and debt planning. So earlier this week, I reached out to the chairperson of the Select Board, Mr. Jeffries, about the calendar that the Select Board is following in terms of some fiscal-related matters. And he reported to me that on 8/16, that the Select Board will be discussing ARPA funding and ARPA-related planning, which I think we probably want to work into an agenda maybe next week, because if we're not meeting on the 11th to talk about ARPA. But then more pertinent to fiscal policy is that on 8/23, they're looking at doing a workshop on fiscal policies. The background on this is that, we've had a number of conversations about involving the Finance Committee in establishing potentially some budgeting guardrails for the Municipal Building Committee. There's been some disagreement on the Municipal Building Committee in terms of the process and when to bring the Finance Committee into the discussion. By the way, the Municipal Building Committee was supposed to meet on Monday and didn't have a quorum, and the meeting was canceled. So that committee is not met for over a month. But I do think that it's something that, with the Select Board planning to meet in August to discuss fiscal policy, that it's something that the Finance Committee does need to involve ourselves in, either in helping to prepare for that meeting, or perhaps attending that meeting, or some other course of action. One of the challenges that we have in approaching this is that we don't have clear direction in terms of a preference from the Municipal Building Design Committee. We've talked through a whole bunch of different options, ranging from, building a brand-new building, but a, lesser size than what was proposed at the last special town meeting on that topic, to potentially building a new elementary school on the TC Passios property, and then rehabilitating the current Turkey Hill property as a municipal building, repurposing this building, repurposing the Ritter building. But I don't think anybody could credibly say this is the path that we're going down on the municipal buildings yet. Hopefully they'll be there soon, but today they're not there. So without even that preference, I think it's very difficult to say, here are the spending guardrails, right? But what we do have, and I think might make for some interesting calculus, is we do have our current debt service plan. And so, my initial thought, and I can't even call it a complete thought, is that, at least we ought to have, if we were to borrow to the limits of both the excludable debt, well, I guess it's really the excludable debt limit. If we were to borrow to that limit, how much money would that be? In each of the coming years, right? What is our borrowing capacity in FY 23, 24, 25, and beyond, if we were to stay within the current fiscal policy?
Yeah.
We did that already.
Well, the problem is that the interest rates have changed, right? So,
Well, no, but what you can borrow isn't going to change.
sure it is. The policy is based on service. So the amount, so if we say that, we're going to borrow $10 million tomorrow, the cost of that borrowing tomorrow is, I would imagine, at least 1% higher than it was 6 or 8 months ago.
True. But to figure out how much we can borrow, you can do that without knowing the interest rates, because you're tying it to the borrowing policy that we have in place. So I don't even remember the numbers. What is it, 11 and
9.
whatever the percentages are, we would be able to take our existing debt service schedules and calculate the maximum that we could borrow.
That's exactly what I'm getting to. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm getting to.
That has been done.
We do that we've done it part of the budget process.
I know that. Yeah, okay. So
Then
we're
you have to figure
speaking
out,
the same language.
Yeah.
The point is that we don't have current numbers on that because the interest rates are different than they were 6 or 8 months ago, whenever the last time that occurred. And so with the select board going into a discussion around fiscal policy, and a chairman of the select board sitting on the municipal building committee looking at potential spending scenarios for rehabilitation of this building, Ritter, potential new building, rehabilitation of an old school building, like at all these various scenarios. If we look at that through the lens of what is our borrowing capacity over the course of the coming years, with as accurate a depiction as we can make, right, which I would assume is whatever the current borrowing costs are, right, because there's no way to know if the interest rates are going to go up or down.
Right.
But today, they're at least 1% higher than they were 6 or 8 months ago, right? Like, I think that calculus is worth doing and kind of making that information available. I don't think that that's an extensive amount of work, but I think that we probably need to do it, talk about it here prior to the select board meeting to discuss fiscal policy.
Well, I think you have to know what projects you intend to borrow for and what the estimated costs of the projects are in order to be able to do what you're asking.
Well, no, so I disagree. And so follow my logic on this. The problem that we got into last year was that we built a plan based on need, not based on available funds. And the needs exceeded the available funds, right? So, and I know it was a nominal excess of the policy in a couple of different years, but nevertheless, they did. I think that visually representing in a spreadsheet or a graph or whatever, what that borrowing capacity is as a function of dollars that we can borrow rather than debt service, I think is very important to be able to inform any committee that says this is the likely policy, this is the policy that we're likely to continue with or expand or reduce. I mean, it's a chicken, I understand it's a chicken and egg argument.
It is, it really is.
But I can show you evidence that the last way we did it didn't work, right? So what I'm saying is, let's make sure that we are explicit in, if we follow the current policy, this is what we have to work for in terms of available dollars to go and get town support, vote a debt exclusion and go borrow this money. This is the available money and when it's available.
I get that, and we can definitely calculate that based on the policy, but you still have to know how much you're going to borrow, because we would have to run a scenario for what those debt service payments are going to be to make sure they fall into what's available in each one of those years.
Right, and the variables would be, it would be an estimation of what that interest rate's going to be,
Right.
based on what the current market is and what they're seeing municipal like projects in our bond rating scenario, and how long taking out the debt for.
So you have to know what the project cost is. You at least have to have you have to have an estimated cost of the project in order, because it's easy to do what you're asking, where you're just calculating how much it can be to still fall within the borrowing policy. But you have to know both things.
So again, we're playing horseshoes and hand grenades here. We're not playing precision target practice, right? Like, so the purpose here is to provide guardrails and an understanding of what the capacity is, right? Now, we could dream up scenarios, right? We want to spend $2 million next year to rehabilitate these two buildings, and $50 $15 million in 4 years to build a new elementary school, probably double that, but who knows, right? And another $10 million a couple years, $10 million a couple years after that to rehabilitate Turkey Hill, or whatever it is, right? I mean, we could dream up these pie-in-the-sky scenarios. They don't actually matter because they're just dreams. We haven't hired architects. We don't really know.
Right.
We've clearly wrongly estimated construction costs in the past, right? So I would submit to you that we have a better handle, as bad as it is, on what interest rates are going to be in 2 or 3 years from now than what our needs are going to be from a construction standpoint 2 or 3 years from now. So it's purely chicken and egg, and I understand that. And, you know, I hate to be crude, but I won't be crude. I don't want to tell you how to solve the problem. What I'm telling you is we have a problem. We as a finance committee, in my opinion, ought to be able to inform the select board, like either the current fiscal policy is likely to do the trick or not, right? Or we don't know if it's going to do the trick or not. Depends on how much you think we're going to spend. If we're going to spend this much, not going to do it. If we're going to spend this much, sure, no problem, right? But I think that illustration is needed from either our financial consultants or you, or, you know, perhaps we spend some time in a finance committee meeting fleshing this out a little bit in terms of what we think we need. But I think that there should be something there to involve more people in understanding what this illustration is ultimately going to mean. If that makes any, it probably doesn't make sense. But.
No, I mean, I get it, but.
Tom Baelish?
Yeah, so I completely agree with what you're trying to achieve here, Peter, which is, and we had talked about as one of the outputs of like what could we do this year that would be helpful, and we had talked about having a deep dive on the whole borrowing debt situation. And to me, this would be part of that, although it sounds like it's getting accelerated because of these meetings coming up in August. But I think a pretty standard approach to modeling something like that would be, you know, just make some baseline assumptions like, okay, in 2025, how much money could we borrow over, you know, a 20-year period, level debt service, like, without violating our restrictions, right? So I think that's at least what I'm taking for what you're saying, Peter, is, you know, is that number 30 million? Is it 50 million? Is it 70 million? I mean, what is that? Just to get us a ballpark number of what's a reasonable estimate for, you know, potential project size.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of look at it the same way I do my own personal finances, right? I got a financial advisor and he sits down with me and he says, what are your goals, right? And then you list out, here's 4 or 5 goals. What's your monthly budgets? That's kind of your operating expenses. And you kind of, they run scenarios, right, against that. And, you know, here's when I want to retire. Here's where I want to retire. Here's where my kids are going to college. And you kind of, you know,
right.
And they run scenarios.
The problem is if you to continue with Karen's argument, is we don't know what our goals are, right? So I
think we do know what our goals are. We clearly have a goal that we want to do something with TC Passios. We clearly have a goal that we want to do something with the school administration building. We clearly want to do something with this town hall. And I think we have other goals that we have to have hard discussions on, is what do we want to charge our tax rates are as a town. So I think when you look at the long-term view of a financial, of a FinCom even, or as a town, these are the questions we should be asking now, and these are like the long-term visions that we should be dealing with now. And then, you know, when we get into budget season, it should be, hey, are we actually you know, are we doing what we need to do for that? For example, should we be spending $2 million in capital projects, or should we be putting $1 million into reserve funds? Because in our long-term interest, that $1 million in reserve funds might be able to help us. And I, you know, so that's how I would, I know government doesn't typically think that way, but that's how industry thinks. That's how we manage our own lives. So I do think that there's something that can be done, you know, along those lines, and have this, you know, I'm sure you could create models to kind of, to play that out. You know, there's probably sophisticated models out there that you'd be able to populate and then run Monte Carlos on them and look at what are the potential interest rates and what's my probability of success of meeting these sorts of things. Perhaps as consultants, if we can't do it ourselves. But I think that that's what we should be doing, is here's the 10 goals of the town long-term, you know, to include things like tax bills and tax rates and that sort of thing, so.
The big equation, I mean, 'cause, so if you look at just non-exempt debt, like if you're talking about raising that threshold more, maxing it out, you're therefore impacting the operating budget, and therefore you have an impact on the departments, and what everyone's going to get as a piece of the pie, essentially. So I think it has a lot more.
So to be clear, while the policy covers both exempt and non-exempt, I do think we should limit the discussion for the purposes of discussion, right? Because what you just brought up, Madam Town Manager, like adds orders of magnitude of complexity, right? So I would propose that we stick with exempt borrowing and leave non-exempt
That makes it
out of the
easier.
equation for purposes of discussion, right? Because you're absolutely right. Like, it would just make it too hard, and we would not make progress, particularly in a month or two. But I do think that that the exempt equation is pretty straightforward.
And all the projects you referenced, they probably all have to be
They would,
exempt.
I'm sure they would.
Probably, yeah.
You're not gonna, none of those are probably.
Well, I mean,
unrelated.
you know.
That's what we figured that we could fit into, think, the non-exempt.
It depends on the extent of what you wanted to do. For example, like if you were just attacking in the close years, Town Hall and Ritter, right? And we've made really good progress on those buildings in terms of knocking stuff from the Vertex report off and that sort of thing, right? So, like, potentially, if we just wanted to do envelope and really, you know, minor stuff from a program perspective, we could potentially do non-exempt borrowing to do those projects, right? But again, I don't think that that's really the crux of the matter, right? The crux of the matter is the municipal building committee is largely thinking in terms of cost per square foot, right? So if you can say, all right, here's your borrowing capacity. If you don't borrow for the next 4 years, your borrowing capacity is going to be X in FY27. Okay, now we, you know, but you still have this bogey in FY32, you got to leave some room for, or, you know, that kind of thing, right? That at least gives you a better understanding, again, taking this from a horseshoes and hand grenades approach rather than, you know, precision approach, a better understanding of what we have to work with. Or it may be obvious, as was a public comment about 6 or 8 months ago, like, we're gonna have to change the policy because there isn't enough money to do what we want to do, right? And I would hate for us to be in a situation where in August of 2022, the select board reaffirms a fiscal policy, which then we realize in May of 2023 is not going to meet our needs. Mr. Baelish.
Yes, thank you. So what, I don't understand, do we have a consultant, a financial consultant that can run these types of models, or that could, you know, and I speak for myself, right? Been 1 year on the finance committee. I have much experience in capital markets and debt raising and other things, but I don't know the specifics of the rules around what our town is allowed to do, what we're, et cetera, or the debt capacity. And this is something I think I've mentioned a few times. Like, I would love to have a debt 101 session, and I think I would love to see as part of that some modeling about potential projects, and we could, you know, I don't know if it's a concern with throwing numbers out there that get into the public domain that are, you know, potentially scare people or whatever, but I think we should have an idea of what those constraints are and what the limitations are, as Peter said, as we go into all of this planning. Because I too worry that we're focused on cost per square foot and we're not focused on what's the right thing for the long-term health of the town.
Okay. So with that calendar in mind, here's what I would propose. I think it's likely that we are going to meet on the 18th of August. And I can commit to, you know, reaching out to you, Karen, and Heather to kind of figure out what's needed and plan a meeting that covers this with some actual numbers and illustration on that date. Is that a reasonable goal? Because in the absence of that, I would feel like the Finance Committee hasn't done its role for the town in making sure that the due diligence is done before the executive branch acts, so to speak, right? So I think it's kind of our job to at least take a look at this before they do.
I think Tom brought up a good question, though. Is there
Yeah.
financial consultants that could help us
Well,
with this?
so I think that so
Can happen based on the policy.
So the Mr. Baelish asked the question, and Mr. Menard just re-asked it. So do you have a sense, do our retained financial consultants have the ability to do some of this modeling that Mr. Baelish has described?
You run, pretty much, we tell them a dollar figure in a length of period of time, and he can run a debt scenario. That's essentially what we've done.
Yeah, that's what what we get from him is just estimates of things that we think we're gonna borrow, but we have a dollar amount where we say we're gonna go out and borrow $8
Right.
million for TCP, and we want to do it over 30 years, and he'll come up with the scenarios. I mean, I can easily calculate how much we can fit into each one of those
Right.
years based on our policy, but if you don't know what the estimated debt service is going to be for the projects that you want to fund, then how do you know if you have enough money or the capacity to do any of it?
I think that that we're kind of on the edge here between tactical and strategic, right? I think the capabilities that you just described to me are very tactical. Here's what we need, figure out how to do it, versus help us figure out what we can do and build a strategy to get there, right? And it feels like we don't have that strategic muscle to really do that. Or maybe we haven't asked for it, or I don't know.
I mean, I can certainly check with him, but typically what we've done in the past is we know what the cost of the project is. We know what our
Yeah. No, I understand.
funding plan is.
I understand.
He
Yeah.
ties it all
But
together.
again, what we're trying to navigate around is, some of the failures of the recent past, right? So we're trying to be more strategic about this, and it may require us to build some new muscle.
Yeah. But I can certainly check with him.
Mr. Baelish?
Yeah, just one last comment, and thanks for all this discussion. But I think these financial consultants, modelers, they do this stuff, every day, and I think they could solve with whatever we want them to solve. And so I think asking, broadly about capacity and other things, and having them run, 3 or 4 or 5 scenarios is probably right in their wheelhouse, but obviously defer to you in your conversation with them.
Okay.
I kind of think if the capability's not out there, Tom should
Go get it.
grab a couple computer science folks and go sell a service to 351 communities. But, I don't know. I think you're going to have, if you don't play out all the variables, you're going to have people coming in and saying, okay, I can have a nice, brand-new, sparkling, elementary school, and I can be 30 kids in a classroom. Well, is it an or is it and I can still be at 20 kids in a classroom? So, where are our priorities? That's what we've got to do. And then we got to model it out financially, and determine, what can we afford as a town?
And again, and this is kind of part of the chicken and egg issue that the municipal building committee ran into when we discussed this a month or two ago is, I've been kind of leaning forward saying, we've got to establish the financial guardrails, and they're saying, well, we're not exactly sure when that happens, right? And the right process to bring in the finance committee and the financial consultants. We can't do it on our own, right? Like, we have a role, but it's a limited role. The problem is that if the finance committee sits back and is too passive around this, then we get way out ahead of our skis and start toppling over, as we have, right? So,
Yep.
I know I'm mixing metaphors, as I do. Okay. All right. We good on this?
Yep.
Heather's like, I just want to get the hell out of here. And I don't blame her. And I don't blame her at all.
School board's calling.
Peter, one question. Can you talk a little bit more about this workshop on fiscal policies? Like, what is the purpose of that? Is it to just review them? Is it to revise them?
So when Mr. Jeffries became chairman of the select board, he outlined a plan to review all of the policies that the select board is responsible for, of which the fiscal policy is one of them. So, and he's been working with the town manager to kind of build out that calendar over the course of, I don't know if it's 6 months or a year or whatever, but it's already changed a few times. But as of my text exchange with him yesterday, that's the game plan, is for that date.
And I think historically, like when we put those fiscal policies in place, I think it was actually the finance committee that
Made the
developed them,
recommendations.
recommended them,
Were you
and
here?
then the select board put them into practice.
Remember the finance committee reviewing them and making a recommendation to the board?
Pretty early in your tenure, I would imagine.
Right.
Yeah.
They were pre-existing before
Okay.
I came, so.
Okay.
What was the question? I'm sorry.
The fiscal policies, like, did they originate with the finance committee and then go to the select board, or how did that evolve?
I think that the financial fiscal policies were originated by the FinCom, I believe, and then
Yeah.
sent to the board.
Yep. And I don't think that today the finance committee is in any position to say, we need a new policy, or we need to make a change to a policy, or anything like that, right? Like, I feel like, for the most part, we're good where we are. It's just with these looming projects, like, we need to weigh in so that we don't find ourselves with a policy that doesn't jive with our needs. And, perhaps, as Chris alluded to, we go down a spending path over the next few years that could potentially put us in worse condition than we otherwise would be, Right. So I think now is the time to be talking about this. So, okay. I will reach out to you via email, Karen, and maybe we can meet early next week to kind of flesh this out a little bit more. Is that okay?
That's okay.
Good. All right. Okay. Back to item number 9. Discuss FY23 goals and operating principles. So very late, considering what I intended to do, I sent the members of the committee a document which was basically a red line edit of last year's goals and procedures memorandum. And basically the substantive changes in that memorandum that I recommended were, we basically line out the paragraph about Chapter 70, because I think we kind of beat that to death in the last year, at least to my satisfaction, that I don't think we should be doing it for the next fiscal year. But then I added a section around the request of the department heads for the annual budget. And I basically added, and I'll just read this, I'll read this paragraph and then open this to the committee for discussion. The committee requests of each department head that annual budget presentations for the FY24 budget season include the following. A, an overview of current fiscal year operations to date, successes, gaps, and priorities that influence budget requests. And B, an overview of the budget requests, including details pertaining to line items included in the town manager's budget recommendation. Please include a review of spending through first half 23 and any expected transfers or lines that will be underspent. So basically, this is putting in writing, and perhaps there needs to be a visual illustration of this as well, but putting into writing what Mr. Baelish brought to our attention in previous meetings around the need for some standardization in department head budget reports. So that in addition to an overview of operations, we actually look at the budget together with the department head as the line items are presented in the town manager's budget presentation. And then with those line items, a view of those line items for the first half of the fiscal year. In other words, are we overspent or underspent, or what the plan is on those lines, in looking to determine if there are any obvious issues that need to be addressed as part of the FY24 budget. So again, this is just putting it into writing, but I think that there's probably a need for a visual illustration to go along with this, but
Yeah.
that's my attempt, and I'll leave it to you guys to figure out what you want to do.
Yes, I think that's good. The other thing maybe that could go along with it is when we have the, what are they, the informal meetings with them or the initial meetings with them, perhaps that's where they lay out a lot of their goals for their budget, and a lot of the, like, what they do portion they did during the budget presentations. And then, you know, this focuses more on a little bit of the nitty-gritty budgetary aspects of it. And then I think that first meeting has a little bit more stated purpose. And the budget presentations get a little bit more into a little bit more timely at a time when we're already having long meetings.
Yep. I can adjust that language in
I don't know if
in the earlier paragraph to address that and to make that clear. I think that it might be a little bit different for different departments. So for example, the DPW director may not be ready to have that discussion come September or October, because he's been in the job for 2 or 3 months, right? Like, whereas, you know, the library probably, or COA, you know, can easily do that.
Yeah, take the library as an example. I think Muir did a great job of giving an overview of everything they do there and all the great work. I think that was the highlight of what should be done at the initial meeting, the informal one, or whatever we called that. And then a little bit more, just here's the meat associated with the budget impacts of implementing that. And, we could just remind ourselves coming into the meeting, hey, flip through and review the charts that he presented before the budget cycle.
Yep. Any other thoughts or comments?
Yeah, Peter, I like it. I may try to tweak the wording a little bit, just because I think what I have tried to get across is, like, I love looking at the line-by-line detail of the various budgets to see where the lines are moving and the percentage changes. So I think this is, 95% of the way there, but if you're okay, I might tweak a couple of
Yeah,
of
please.
the words.
Please. And I, what my hope is that everybody, I wanted to just toss this around a little bit tonight. Thematic changes I can easily write to, but if you want to do some tweaking and send some ideas back to me, I can bring this forth again next week and we can, I don't think there's anything super controversial here, so.
No, it's all, I think it's very, very good.
And is there anything glaringly missing, I guess, is the other question. Like, have we missed something here that we need to add a paragraph?
I didn't see it before
Okay.
the meeting.
All right, so if you want to give it a read.
And you don't use OneDrive, so it's not in the...
Can't teach an old dog new tricks. Okay. Any other discussion on the goals and operating principles? Okay,
I don't think this is a year to make drastic changes.
nor do I. Nor do I.
Composition and...
But I do think that, that there's no reason why we can't zero in on, what we're asking for here.
Yeah, no,
with the
I agree.
department heads.
I think that this is
it's
a good
totally
change.
reasonable.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Item number 11, discuss plan and timing for addressing town meeting amendments to capital plan articles. So this is something that I would love to get taken care of before I exit the Finance Committee. But I'm just not exactly sure of the timing to get this all vetted out. My intent was to meet with town council this month at office hours to begin an exploration of, if it came to it, what would we need to do in terms of bylaws or the charter to affect the change that we want to occur. Not that it would ever get to that, but I feel as if, the most likely resolution to this is that the select board agrees that they're gonna, from here on out, write the capital planning article in a way that permits amendments the way we envision amendments being made. Because if you recall, the town council opinion and the moderator's opinion was entirely based on the wording of the article. And so if the select board agrees to change the wording, then, in my view, that's the most expedient way to get there. But there are a couple issues there. Number one is they might not want to do it. Number two is they might decide to do it, and then the composition of the select board changes, and they can do whatever they want, right? So we could go, one step up and two steps back over the course of a few years. Or we could write a bylaw to deal with this, which I think is probably the most permanent solution. I don't want to look at affecting the charter because that's much, much, much more involved. But I wanted to get town council in on the narrative to figure out exactly where that language should be if we were to, write a new piece to the bylaws and how that should be worded. Best case scenario from a timing perspective, I think, is that I'm not going to be able to meet with him next week. I have to be at a conference in Boston next Wednesday. you know, perhaps another member could bring it to his attention, but I'm probably just going to drive it to email and look to land this at some point in August, in terms of getting town council to weigh in on this. And then, you know, maybe we get on the select board agenda in September. There's no, I mean, you know, there's nothing pressing from a timing perspective. There isn't going to be a capital planning article until annual town meeting. But I do think that this is something that we want to affect. Open any thoughts or ideas on this.
Yeah, I agree. The end goal of any of this should be that the town legislature is able to affect the capital plan put forward without having to outright reject it. And I also think town council had a little bit of the way it's worded and historical precedence in his opinion, which made it a little bit of a weaker argument in my opinion. And I don't think it should be the whims of the current select board. I think it should be the legislature not the executive branch that makes that decision. So I would be open to a bylaw change too.
Okay. So if we were to go, so to be clear, if we were to go down the bylaw path, then we would probably want to get this in on, you know, as a submitted article for a special town meeting.
Which is tight.
Yeah, well, we can make it happen.
Yeah.
If we want. Any
Yeah,
other?
Peter, I'm fully supportive of you doing that, and I think it's I think it's very good to clarify that, and, you know, if people disagree with it, we have that discussion, but I think it's the right thing to clarify it, because it was quite confusing, as we all know, a few months ago.
Okay. So what I would propose is I will reach out to town council via email, copying, or I'll reach out to the town manager and affect communication to town council to ask his assistance in authoring a proposed bylaw change to address this. Does anybody have any comment, or is everybody more or less in agreement with that? Okay. I don't think that requires a vote. Next item, discuss new member onboarding plan. So I have put exactly 0 thought into this since our last meeting. Mr. Baelish, you had raised your hand as taking the lead on it. Is this anything that you put any thought into, or do we want to table, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't have any progress on that, but I think over the next, let's say, 3 or 4 weeks, I would like to come in and maybe meet with the town management and just talk through what that might look like, and the finance director.
Okay. Do you want to?
I mean, I have in mind just putting some pages together that is a helpful kind of document to introduce a lot of these topics.
Do you want to potentially report on that on August 18th or the 25th?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah?
The 18th is fine.
All right.
So there's the Mass Finance Association. There may be another
Association of Finance Committees, yeah.
Association of Finance Committees. Maybe somewhere to look again as to what materials they have. Which reminds me, I think you're the liaison to that.
Yeah, I probably am.
So
I sat in on their meetings this year, so, or their conference.
just another reorg thing we need to.
Yeah. Yep. Thanks for bringing that up.
You're welcome.
I should have just kept my mouth shut and kept on. Kidding.
I think they have a lot of good videos and stuff on there. I did look at some stuff and,
Okay.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's a great idea. Thanks, Chris.
Okay. So I will add that, I will leave that off of the agenda until Evan puts it back on 8/18. Discuss summer calendar and topics for discussion. I think I got a pretty good idea here, but bear with me. I'm just going to kind of talk through this just in terms of rough summer calendar. So we will meet next week on the 28th. We will not meet on August 11th, but we will meet on August 18th, and then again on August 25th. Is that okay with everybody? All right. Okay, minutes. There are 2 sets of minutes in the OneDrive, a set from 5/19 and a set from 6/9. Has anybody taken a look at those and/or would like to make a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion we approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve the minutes for 5/19 and 6/9 from Mr. Gray and a second from Mr. Menard. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please vote your preference. Mr. Baelish.
I'm going to abstain.
Okay. Mr. Gray.
Yes.
Mr. Waters.
Aye.
Mr. Menard.
Aye.
And I for myself. Minutes pass. Committee reports. Are there any committee reports? As I mentioned earlier, the Municipal Building Design Committee was scheduled to meet on Monday. We had to cancel due to a quorum issue, and I don't know when our next meeting will be, but I suspect it'll be probably the 1st of August.
It's no longer now, it's just your.
I'll get in touch, I'll get in touch with them and let them know about myself, and so that I'll be in the loop with them.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. Mr. Jeffries is the chairman of that committee, so
Yep.
I will, please reach out to him and I will apprise him as well. Any public comments? Okay, we've beaten future meetings to death. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Peter, before we do, if you don't mind.
Please, go ahead.
So I did reach out to Jay, and I spoke to him over text while we were actually in the meeting, and he has said that he has zero interest in sitting in any position above just a general member. So take that for what it's will, or what you will.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Waters. Would you like to go back and reopen? Are we okay with waiting another week on this?
Makes no difference to me, but just wanted to put it out there so that it was public record and whatnot.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Just in case he's not here next meeting as well.
I think there's a strong possibility you'll be appointed in absentia next week, Mr. Waters.
Short straw.
So just throwing it out there, if we do make him chair, then there is a little bit of an easier possible transition with you while you're still here. So I would have no problem with voting on that, going back,
You want to do it tonight versus waiting? Yeah?
as long as he wants to do it tonight.
I'm okay with that.
Sure.
All right.
All right.
Whew, I don't think we've ever pulled an alibi on a motion to adjourn.
There you go. All right, I'll make a motion to nominate Evan Waters as chair of the Finance Committee.
Is there a second?
I second.
Any further discussion? Okay, roll call vote. Mr. Baelish.
Aye.
Mr. Gray.
Aye.
Mr. Waters.
Aye.
Mr. Menard.
Aye.
And an aye for myself. Congratulations, Mr. Waters.
Thank you.
You are the chairman of the Finance Committee. Would you like to take over now, or do you want me to
No, by all means.
run this thing into the ground?
Do we want to do the other one?
Yeah, we should. Well, at least we won't do the committees, but
Yeah.
okay. Is there any nomination for vice chair?
I'd nominate Chris Menard for vice chair.
I'll second that.
All right, any further discussion? Mr. Baelish,
Aye.
Mr. Gray,
Aye.
Mr. Waters,
Aye.
Mr. Menard,
Aye,
and an aye for myself. Congratulations.
thank you. It's a nice warm seat.
It is. Is there any nominations for clerk?
What did we decide earlier? I think it was
Tom Baelish.
Tom Baelish.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to nominate Tom Baelish as clerk.
Second?
Okay, we have a nomination and a second for Mr. Baelish as clerk. Any further discussion? Mr. Baelish,
Aye.
Mr. Gray,
Aye.
Mr. Waters,
Aye.
Mr. Menard,
Aye.
and an aye for myself. All right.
Wow.
Can we adjourn?
Now can we adjourn?
All right, I'd like to make a motion.
That was
to
very
adjourn.
odd. There's a motion from
second
Mr.
adjourn.
Menard to adjourn and a second from Mr. Gray.
Yes.
All those in favor, Mr. Baelish,
Aye.
Mr. Gray,
Aye.
Mr. Waters,
Aye.
Mr. Menard,
Aye.
and an aye for myself. Evan, I will reach out to you probably tomorrow and set up some time to sort through all this.
That sounds wonderful. I'll be
All right.
available.
Looking forward to it. Good. Congratulations, and thank you very much.
Thank you for stepping up, Evan.
Yes, greatly
Yeah,
appreciated.
thank you, Evan, Chris.
Everyone, good night.
All right, have a good night, everybody.